If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, call 988 on your phone and be put through and connected to trained counselors who will lend an ear, provide support, and link you to local resources as necessary. Alternatively, visit 988lifeline.org for helpful links and additional information. Please don't struggle in silence. You are not alone. Hello, and welcome back to the channel. If you were hoping for a fan edit, you must be new around here. If you've been around a while, then you already know. Regardless of why you clicked, I'm glad you did. Sure, it's been a minute, but my mind has just been brimming with different ideas as I continue to put my spin on the various pieces of content I have to work with. Add to that a very generous someone who has helped the library grow, you know who you are, and the potential for different story beats has undoubtedly increased. So forgive me for putting off this next installment of the channel's most beloved segment, Outside the Frame. Outside the Frame, where the fan edits that grace this channel are broken down to their most minute detail and element, where creative liberty is explored, all for the purpose of sharing the process of their inception. As you've hopefully been able to garner from the thumbnail and title, today's topic is indeed thumbnails and titles. At this point in YouTube's history, it's pretty much a played out discussion, but because of the platform we're on, juxtaposed to the type of content this is, making a thumbnail can be particularly challenging. Allow me to preface this by stating that this is not so much a how-to guide on making a thumbnail, as much as it is a look at the efforts I've made to make this channel's thumbnails more appealing, while operating within the confines of the community guidelines of the platform. Let's jump into it. Of the many cooking channels on this platform, I don't imagine many of them having trouble putting together and submitting a thumbnail that accurately encapsulates the essence of the video. If you're making lasagna, surely a picture of the finished product would be sufficient enough to relay to the potential viewer what they're in for. Add to that a title such as homemade lasagna, and it's pretty cut and dry. The thumbnail, that is, not the lasagna. But here, on this channel, things are a little more dicey. I present a product that, one after another, walks the razor's edge of the community guidelines. A product whose golden goose is this voluptuous work of art, whose very essence oozes sensuality, and her equally beautiful adversaries stand shoulder to shoulder with her, walking in lockstep. How then do you make a thumbnail that encapsulates the essence of the content, appeals to the viewers, and also manages to skirt any reprimand from a very stringent platform? How do you push the envelope? It seems like forever ago that this thumbnail was removed by YouTube because it violated their community guidelines. This thumbnail is one from the early days wherein I just pick a picture from the crop of video stills YouTube generates during the upload process. While I was aware of the community guidelines' hard stance against anything sexual, I didn't consider the image to be sexual. Of course, this is a subjective and educated view. Subjective in that you can ask 5 people how they receive the image and arrive at 5 different answers. Educated because, as being the producer of the fan edit, I was privy to the context from which this image was extracted from. Sure, not the initial context, by any stretch, but by the context in which it was repurposed in service to the story I was trying to tell. A story that wasn't remotely sexual. I suppose you could say that I shot myself in the foot and YouTube handed me the gun. Within the community guidelines, it is stated that the content creators are prohibited from isolating sexually explicit content from existing media to upload to their channels. And I suppose you could say throwing out a thumbnail like this one kind of does just that, whether or not I see it as sexual. Still, there's no denying a thumbnail like that draws a lot of attention from the target audience. Numbers don't lie. If one good thing did come from the removal of that thumbnail, it was that now I had a ceiling, a limit, a weight capacity from which to judge my thumbnails going forward. Now, the most important aspect to a fan edit thumbnail is undoubtedly Tracy Jordan's Batgirl, the golden goose. There's no denying she, for however few there are, she gets the clicks. It almost goes without saying, but the reality is, when you subscribe to the channel, when you watch a fan edit, you're not invested in me. You're not subscribed to me. You're subscribed to her. Most are not invested in the narrative, the graphics, the dialogue. You're invested in the allure. You're subscribed to the sensuality. You're waiting to see Barbara squeeze into that purple uniform, take on her equally beautiful adversaries, get bested, etc., etc. More recently, as I'm sure you've noticed, I've taken a more artistic route with my thumbnails. Instead of using a random screenshot from within the video, I've tried to stretch my creativity so that the thumbnail expresses, more or less, what the episode will be about. Let's break down the thumbnail for the edit Bat on a String. The thumbnail shows Batgirl in a very bewildered stance, arms lazily stretched out, suspended by illuminated green ropes, with the Batgirl logo behind her against a black backdrop. There is a green question mark at the top left corner. Even a casual Batman fan should know that a question mark generally correlates to the Riddler. The title, Bat on a String, suggests Batgirl is tethered to something or someone by some means. Now, while the image suggests physical restraint, the story in fact revolves around blackmail perpetrated by the Riddler's daughter so that Batgirl might do her bidding. Now for the all-important visual aesthetic. I have no doubt that were I to use a screenshot of Batgirl with her arms tied above her head, the thumbnail would be removed and I'd be issued another warning or a strike. But because I have isolated Batgirl from an existing screenshot and tethered her arms to a very animated illustration of restraints, the thumbnail stands a better chance of passing the eye test. Add to this an artistic effect filter which distorts the image to that of an animated styling, and you've got a recipe for a thumbnail which stays within the community guidelines, serves to hopefully appeal to the target audience, and subliminally encapsulates the essence of the episode. What about having two characters in one thumbnail? The very thing that got me in trouble to begin with. To that I say, play with scale. More often than not, the sturdy birdie is getting bested by her enemies. Poison Ivy, Catwoman, the Joker, they've all managed to get the jump on our daring heroine throughout this channel's history. I've managed to translate that sentiment onto a thumbnail by shrinking Batgirl down a few sizes. Take Bitter Nightshade as a prime example. Even without a visual, the title suggests that Poison Ivy may be involved, given that Bitter Nightshade is a type of plant. The word bitter might even suggest an unsettling resentment on behalf of one of the characters. As for the visual aesthetic, again against a black backdrop, we have a heavily stylized silhouette of Poison Ivy, smirking at an equally stylized shrunken down version of Batgirl, who is sunken into a potted plant and wrapped in vines. The image conveys Ivy's dominion over Batgirl, suggesting that things might go south for the heroine in this installment. Just look at the thumbnail for Victims of Circumstance. Batgirl is stripped down to her bare essentials, but because she scaled down drastically and postured up against that ski mask, this thumbnail managed to pass the eye test. Had the original screenshot been used, I'm sure we'd be having a different conversation. Of course, I can't be 100% sure, but I believe that because of this heavily stylized aesthetic, because these are silhouettes, because they're animated just so, I've managed to stay balanced on that ever tricky razor wire, appealing to the audience, skirting reprimand from the platform, and mostly managing to visually encapsulate the essence of the edit. Yes, I know some thumbnails aren't winners, but the well gets dry from time to time. So, that will about do it for this segment. Again, this segment wasn't exactly meant to teach you how to make a thumbnail, as much as to showcase the efforts I make to stay within the community guidelines. For those still watching, thank you for making it to the end. It's truly been a privilege to fuse my artistic license to these various pieces of content I have to work with, and I'm glad to share it with you. On a final note, how would you rank some of these thumbnails? Personally, Dr. Psycho Part 1 is my favorite because of how she just towers over Gotham like some gigantic threat, which, if you watch that series, you'll find that she does indeed cause major problems. As always, enjoy these fan edits while you can. There's no telling what the future holds, and I can't promise there'll be a tomorrow for any of this. Thank you for your support. Be blessed.